India celebrates a landmark $14 billion agreement with Burkina Faso for the import of premium maize and sorghum. This partnership, led by President Ibrahim Traoré, strengthens food security and opens new markets for both nations. Alongside trade, India will share advanced farming technology and training, ensuring sustainable growth and prosperity for our people.
A $14 billion deal. Not for oil, not for weapons, but for food. At a moment when global hunger is rising and supply chains are breaking, a bold agreement between Africa and Asia has quietly rewritten the rules of survival. This is not just about grain shipments, it's about who controls food, who controls prices, and who refuses to beg anymore. While traditional powers tighten exports and play politics with hunger, a new alliance has stepped forward with a long-term plan. What you're about to hear is not charity, not aid, and not a temporary fix. It's a strategic move that could redefine food security, trade power, and independence across an entire continent.
The announcement landed like a shockwave across global markets and diplomatic circles. A $14 billion grain agreement linking West Africa to South Asia, instantly redefining how food security, trade power, and geopolitical influence are negotiated in the global South. In a world rattled by supply chain disruptions, climate stress, and rising food prices, the deal signals something far bigger than wheat and rice. It marks a decisive shift in who controls the lifelines of survival and who no longer wants to depend on the old order. At the center of the agreement is Burkina Faso's transitional leader, Ibrahim Traoré, and the government of India, one of the world's largest agricultural producers and exporters. The deal, valued at an estimated $14 billion over multiple years, reportedly covers large-scale grain supply, price stabilization mechanisms, agricultural cooperation, and long-term trade guarantees. While specific implementation details are expected to unfold in stages, the core objective is clear: secure, reliable, affordable grain supplies for African markets while building a strategic food corridor between Africa and Asia. For Burkina Faso and its regional partners, the stakes could not be higher. Food insecurity remains one of the most destabilizing forces across the Sahel and wider Africa. Climate volatility, conflict, and dependence on external suppliers have repeatedly exposed African states to price shocks and shortages beyond their control. By locking in long-term grain access with a major producer, the agreement aims to reduce vulnerability to sudden export bans, speculative pricing, and politically driven supply disruptions that have plagued global food markets in recent years. Beyond immediate supply, the deal is framed as part of a broader push toward economic independence. Rather than relying solely on emergency aid or spot market purchases, the agreement emphasizes predictable deliveries, negotiated pricing, and cooperation on storage, logistics, and agricultural planning. This approach reflects a growing African strategy, shifting from reactive food imports to structured partnerships that strengthen bargaining power and long-term resilience. India's role in this agreement is equally strategic. As a rising global power with expanding influence across Africa, India gains a reliable long-term market for its agricultural surplus while deepening diplomatic and economic ties on the continent. For New Delhi, the partnership aligns with a broader effort to position itself as a dependable alternative to traditional Western suppliers. And as a counterweight to other major powers competing for influence in Africa, the benefits for India go beyond export revenue. By anchoring itself in Africa's food security architecture, India enhances its geopolitical standing as a partner invested in stability rather than short-term profit. The agreement also opens doors for Indian involvement in African agriculture infrastructure, including storage facilities, transport networks, fertilizer supply, and farming technology. Over time, this could translate into deeper trade integration, political goodwill, and strategic alignment in international forums. Regionally, the implications are significant. If successfully implemented, the deal could ease food price pressure not only in Burkina Faso, but across neighboring countries that share trade corridors and markets. Stable grain flows reduce the risk of social unrest driven by food shortages, an issue that has historically triggered protests, political crises, and cross-border instability. In this sense, the agreement is as much a security initiative as it is an economic one. Globally, The deal reflects a broader realignment underway in international trade. As traditional supply chains fracture and major exporters increasingly prioritize domestic needs, countries in the global south are seeking direct, long-term partnerships with one another. Africa-Asia trade, once secondary to Africa's ties with Europe and North America, is now emerging as a central pillar of global commerce. This agreement reinforces that trend, signaling a move toward multipolar food diplomacy. Analysts note that the scale of the deal sends a message. African nations are no longer content to be passive price takers in global markets. By negotiating at scale and on multi-year terms, they are asserting agency over essential resources. At the same time, India's willingness to commit to such a large arrangement underscores its ambition to shape global norms around trade, development, and South-South cooperation. Of course, challenges remain. Execution will determine whether the promise of the agreement becomes reality. Logistics, financing structures, currency risks, and political stability will all play critical roles. Transparency and effective governance will be essential to ensure the benefits reach populations most in need. Yet, even with these uncertainties, the strategic intent behind the deal is unmistakable. What makes this moment stand out is not just the size of the figure attached to it, but what it represents. In an era defined by scarcity and competition, this agreement points toward cooperation built on mutual interest and long-term planning. It reflects a growing confidence among African leaders to negotiate boldly and a recognition by Asian powers that Africa is not merely a market, but a partner shaping the future of global stability. If the agreement holds, historians may look back on it as a turning point, when food security became a tool of sovereignty. When Africa-Asia relations moved from rhetoric to real economic muscle, and when $14 billion deal reshaped the balance of influence in a world hungry for new solutions.